On a quiet Sunday morning in the spring of 1930, Roscoe Dungy, a well-known newspaperman and civil rights leader, sped from his home in Oklahoma City through the Arbuckle Mountains and descended into the valley of the Red River. Dungy was on his way to Sherman, Texas, where, the day before, a black man had suffered unspeakable violence, all in the name of protecting so-called white womanhood. Dungy did not know it yet, but this was just a glimpse into the tragedy that was about to unfold in front of him. Dungy had seen such atrocities before. He witnessed the painted lies about the massacre in Elaine, Arkansas in 1919 and the distorted tales following the Tulsa riots in 1921. He had a reputation for giving an accurate description of such events. At the time, it was popular for newspapers to call such events race riots, when they were most often massacres of black people at the hands of white mobs. But first, he needed to strip away the layers of white propaganda if he were to reveal the grim truth to both the black and white communities. This truth would be hard to face, but Dungy felt he was in a better position than anyone else to expose it. Dungy said he wanted to see it all up close, the faces of white people, twisted in hatred and violence, and the faces of his own, gripped with terror. He knew that true understanding could only come by witnessing the extremes of human behavior under such circumstances. Arriving late Sunday night, Dungy's car limped into the outskirts of the city. Dungy was informed that the city of Sherman was under martial law, with the streets lined with soldiers. Determined to get through, Dungy pressed on, navigating the dark back streets and avoiding main thoroughfares. In the dead of night, Dungy and his companion found themselves wandering the black neighborhoods, searching for a safe place to stay. The streets were empty, the homes dark. After circling for what felt like an eternity, they finally spotted two black women, their faces etched with fear. The women hesitated, paralyzed by terror, but eventually led Dungy to the home of an elderly woman who reluctantly agreed to give them shelter for the night. Thus began the whispers from black neighbors in Sherman, seeking out the newspaperman to tell the harrowing tale of the last 24 hours, the tale of George Hughes, and the impact his story had on the black community in Sherman. Sherman was often referred to as the Athens of Texas due to its status as an educational and cultural hub in the early 20th century. This nickname reflected the town's dedication to higher learning and intellectual growth, drawing a parallel to ancient Athens, renowned as the birthplace of Western education and philosophy. Sherman was home to institutions like Austin College, which bolstered its reputation. In addition to its educational institutions, Sherman hosted several literary societies, lecture halls, and libraries. The town's citizens placed great value on education and culture, frequently organizing public events focused on intellectual discussions, lectures, and performances evoking the cultural vibrancy of ancient Athens. Churches and religious organizations, especially those connected to Austin College, also played a role in shaping Sherman's image as a center for both moral and intellectual development. The Presbyterian Church, closely associated with Austin College, contributed significantly to the town's scholarly environment. This scholarly reputation is why no one could have anticipated the events that would unfold over the next 8 days. The alleged crime occurred when George Hughes, an illiterate, itinerant black farmhand from Honey Grove, showed up at the farm of Drew Farlow to collect payment for 3 weeks of work. Instead of finding Farlow, he encountered Farlow's wife named Pearl and their 5-year-old son. According to her account, Hughes threatened her with a shotgun, tied her to a bed, and assaulted her. Her son escaped and alerted a neighbor. Hughes fled but was tracked by neighbors and found in a field by Deputy Sheriff E.L. Shipp. When Shipp tried to arrest him, Hughes fired 2 shots but missed. Shipp returned fire and also missed, but then was able to subdue Hughes with the butt of his gun. Hughes was taken to the county jail, where he is said to have confessed to the crime. The trial was set for the next Friday, the earliest possible date. The case quickly escalated beyond a local legal matter into a powder keg of racial tension. It was being reported that the Negro not only had raped the woman 3 times in succession, but that he had mutilated her throat and breasts, and that he was diseased. These rumors were later discounted by the doctor who examined her. In the 6 days between the incident and the trial, a notorious bootlegger and Ku Klux Klan member named Jefferson Davis Jones, also known as Slim, and later indicted as a mob leader, rode through the rural portions of Grayson and its adjoining counties, telling the people about the case and the time of the trial. Some feel that Jones was the oral agent who was responsible for the events to come. The mayor of Sherman, Jesse Eubanks, sat in his office, which overlooks the square, and noticed the unusually large number of people out around the courthouse. To him, it was a great crowd of countrymen come to his town. Maybe they would spend some of their money there. The long wet spell had left them with nothing more interesting to do. The mayor looked upon the Hughes matter as an affair of the county rather than of the city. As the crowd swelled, the Texas Rangers, led by famed Captain Frank Hamer, who later became famous for killing Bonnie and Clyde, tried to maintain order. News reporters of the day noted the presence of many women and teenage boys. Local law enforcement deferred to Hamer's expertise, but remained on high alert, anticipating that violence could erupt at any moment. A woman in the crowd, unknown to locals, chided the men around her for what she called their yellowness. She persuaded some teenage boys to rip an American flag from a wall and march it around the courthouse, calling for men to join them. That is, if they had enough red blood to do something about that nigger who had raped a white woman. The crowd was a lit match. Then came the gasoline. An ambulance came roaring up to the courthouse with the victim in tow. She brought a prepared statement about the assault that was read to the jury by the district attorney. The sight of the injured woman being carried into the building on a stretcher to confront her accuser was more than the crowd could bear. Instantly, they started throwing rocks and sticks through the courthouse windows. They paused the trial, and Hughes was locked in a vault in the district clerk's office for his own protection. The courthouse was fortified with Texas Rangers and officers standing guard. As Hughes was brought into the courthouse, the mob's anger reached a fever pitch. Tear gas bombs were deployed, forcing the group back temporarily. However, by noon, the mob had gotten organized, and they launched an aggressive assault on the courthouse doors, breaking them down. Tensions continued to rise. The woman who accused Hughes of assaulting her was a niece of one of Sherman's most senior and most popular policemen, Bevy Atnip, but there is no evidence he played any significant role in the events following. Hamer knew the clock was ticking. He understood the gravity of the situation. Rumors abound that the governor had given the order to hold them if you can, but do not shoot anybody. This was later denied by Governor Moody, and it became a major sticking point. Hamer confided in Judge Carter before the proceedings that he felt Hughes could not be tried without significant violence. At noon, the courthouse doors were battered down, and the mob surged into the building. At that moment, Hughes was still locked in a vault, surrounded by Texas Rangers. Members of the jury, Hughes' defense attorney, and others who just happened to be in the building had been taken to the district clerk's office after the mob made its way to the courtroom. After using tear gas, the mob was repelled. For a while. It was clear that the lawmen were outnumbered and overpowered. The mob's numbers grew by the minute, and their determination to take Hughes turned the courthouse into a battleground. At 1 p.m., the mob made another push for Hughes, so he was moved deeper into the courthouse for protection, but the mob was relentless. Additional officers were summoned from surrounding towns, and a message was sent to Governor Dan Moody requesting reinforcements. A detachment of 10 men under Captain George Higgins of the Texas National Guard was rushed to Sherman. Officers again successfully expelled the crowd from the courthouse using tear gas. Still, the tension outside persisted. At about 2 p.m., the mob regrouped and renewed its attack on the courthouse. The third attack was noisier and rowdier than the first, but this attempt also failed to gain access to Hughes. But things were getting harder. The officers were running low on tear gas. Reports indicated that more people kept arriving from surrounding towns, further inflaming the situation. The short highway between Sherman and Denison was overwhelmed with automobiles hurrying to the scene. A ground-level window had been broken, and a teenage boy was seen pouring gasoline into the basement of the courthouse. Flames quickly erupted. At 2:30, the last of the tear gas was deployed to repulse the mob. Soon after, a loud explosion was heard. Ladders were raised to the open windows of the clerk's office, and all descended to safety. Hughes refused to escape with the others from the fire-doomed building, knowing the fate that awaited him at the hands of the angry mob. The steel shutters of the vault office were then closed to protect the legal records being stored there. The fire spread quickly. The fire department answered the first alarm and extinguished a blaze in the south hallway of the building. When word spread that the fire department was on the scene, rioters rushed over and hacked their hoses with axes stolen from a nearby hardware store. They were hell-bent on ensuring that nothing could stop the blaze. The mob chanted to roast him. Many newspapers later reported that women and children were standing around the burning fire singing, "Happy Days Are Here Again," a popular tune of the day. As the day wore on, National Guardsmen arrived, but the damage was already done. The courthouse was engulfed in flames. By the time the flames were extinguished, the vault and a few external walls were all that remained. Because of the fire, it took many hours for the mob to attempt to get at Hughes again. Rumors spread through the crowd that he was not even in there, and that the National Guard had somehow gotten him out, and that he was in hiding. This rumor created a very serious and ultimately deadly animosity between the white mob and the National Guard. At 10:45 p.m., Governor Moody signed a proclamation declaring a state of martial law in Sherman. He said Colonel L. McGee would remain in command and that troops would remain in Sherman as long as they are needed. He said the proclamation was issued based on representations made to him by substantial citizens of Sherman who believed martial law was needed. This made very little difference to the mob, who are now engaging in vandalism, looting, and assaulting members of the National Guard. The mayor proclaimed that reputable citizens and police officers tried to quiet things down, but most of the members of the mob were from nearby towns and not from Sherman. It is regrettable that some of the leaders of the mob and others of its members were from Sherman, but the majority of them were from other points in this and neighboring counties. He was desperately trying to divert the blame away from the citizens of Sherman. After the 3 unsuccessful attempts to reach Hughes, the rioters returned to the smoldering vault at midnight, this time with dynamite. They set off several charges, and a deep-throated roar erupted from the crowd as they finally broke into the vault. Hughes was inside, but was already dead. He had tried to shield himself from the intense heat with a bucket of water. It wasn't enough. He ultimately died of smoke inhalation before the mob could get to him, a fact later confirmed by the coroner. This did not satisfy the mob. In fact, it enraged them even more. They retrieved Hughes' body, tied a rope around it, and dragged it from the smoldering ruins, further desecrating him in an orgy of violence. He was dragged to the black neighborhood. They stopped at the black-owned Smith Hotel and found a cottonwood tree in front to string up Hughes. Members of the mob broke into the black drugstore and other shops for chairs and furniture, and other wood items with which to make a fire. They stacked these items under the tree and set them on fire below Hughes's dead body, setting it ablaze. While the body was roasting, everything of value from the black-owned businesses was taken. Drinks, chewing gum, and other confectionaries were passed from the shelves to the folks outside, among whom were a goodly number of women, some with small children and babies in arms. Then the hotel was set on fire. The mob then set about terrorizing the black neighborhood, burning down 3 blocks of homes and businesses, including the offices of 3 doctors, a dentist, and famed attorney William Durham. Many in the black community abandoned their homes and hid in the trees and bushes, afraid for their lives. As the mob raged on, over 300 National Guard soldiers patrolled the streets in the aftermath as martial law was declared. Yet, the mob still seemed unstoppable. In the forefront of the group who faced off with the guardsmen were a number of women, one of whom held her baby high over her head with the challenge, "Shoot it, you yellow nigger-loving soldiers. Shoot it." Attempts to restore order proved futile in the face of such sheer numbers and unbridled rage. Tear gas, guns, and the guardsmen's presence were no match for the lynch rule that had overtaken Sherman. Chants of "burn the niggers" turned into chants of "burn the soldiers." And then it began to rain. Hard.